Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Our guest tonight is Tom DeWeese, founder of American Policy Center. Before we get to Tom and something totally unrelated to the topic, was it not great to hear about President Trump ignoring that federal judge in reference to sending the trendy whatever you want to call them, the Venezuelan terrorist gang that's over in our country that was sent here or allowed here under Biden. And if you haven't heard the story, which you probably have, I guess they'd already sent them on the plane over to El Salvador, and the judge is upset. Somehow these judges think, these district federal judges think they have the authority to tell the president that he can't do that, okay? He's using the Alien Act from 1798. It's well within his power, from everything I can tell. And yet this judge is upset about it, actually thought that he could direct them to have the plane turn around and come back, which is insane. But I'm, on this whole problem of federal judges just thinking that any district federal judge thinks they have the authority, the constitutional authority, to tell the president what he can or can't do. It's just insane. But I'm glad to see that the Trump administration ignored that, and I hope they continue to ignore some of these leftist, insane judges who are exceeding their authority. They were not elected, and I think too often we confuse the rule of law with anything any judge says. And this is certainly something that President Trump was well within his rights to do. So now back to the main topic. Tom, thank you for being with us tonight. And you're founder, or one of the founders, of the American Policy Center. You guys have been around a good while now, going on 40 years, I think. And but unfortunately, some people still don't know about the great work you do. Could you tell us a little bit about the American Policy Center?
Absolutely, and thank you, Dave. I'm really happy to be with you tonight, and I think we have a lot to talk about. But
absolutely,
yeah, I founded the American Policy Center back in 1988, and we worked on all kinds of issues as we began: personal privacy issues and education issues, and one day I started asking questions as I was looking at the environmental movement, Sierra Club and Nature Conservancy and so forth. And I just asked the question, as they're putting all these policies in place, what about the property rights of the people who own that land? And that started the war. And at one point I took on the Sierra Club head on. That was an interesting clash.
Wow. When was that? That would have been a good ways back?
That was back in the... But then a very close advisor of mine, really the gentleman who really taught me a lot of these things, was a gentleman named Henry Lamb. And Henry went to the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, and he observed the creation of a thing called Agenda 21. And he came home and brought a bunch of us into a hotel room in St. Louis. And for over 24 hours, we were hearing, and then there's this, and then there's this, and then it's one of those kind of things where you're saying, I can't take anymore. But man, he really educated us. And I became one of the 3 people who really took it on. And we created Freedom 21 and we had 10 national conferences over 10 years. And began to build a group of cadre of people to fight it. But the thing about it was, this was an agenda. They called it a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. That's what they said it was.
And they mean it.
Yeah, absolutely mean it. And as we started attacking it, then it became, well, I don't know what your problem is. This is just a voluntary suggestion about a better way maybe to protect the planet and its environment. But yet they were calling it a comprehensive blueprint for the reorganization of human society. Yep. And I'll tell you, Dave, just real quick, one of the things that I knew from the beginning, but I never really talked about it too much over the years, was the fact that one of the main tenets of Agenda 21 was to vastly reduce the population.
Yep.
There were some people in the Sierra Club believed that the Earth could only sustain about 250 million people. They finally
Good
decided,
Lord.
the UN decided on a billion, and that, reducing the population. And I didn't talk about it much because I was having enough trouble getting people to understand the threat to their property.
Right.
And they start saying like that, I figured I would lose them immediately. And but now, as you're looking at these policies, what we went through with the pandemic, what we're going through with the Great Reset, with the World Economic Forum, on and on and on, population reduction is a major part of all of that, and they openly say it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. You mentioned Henry Lamb. Isn't he from Tennessee, or wasn't he living in Tennessee?
He lived Yeah, he lived in Tennessee. He passed away, unfortunately, about 10 years ago. It was a great loss. And the other gentleman that I worked closely with between Henry and me and was Dr. Michael Kaufman. And he also passed away just a few years ago. So I'm the last one left of the original three that took this thing on.
Oh, wow.
But we built a cadre of people, and we've got a lot of good activists across the country that are understanding this, and a lot more understand it now than used to. So that's the good news. Yeah. So
people have caught on quite a bit more than, because I remember about 12, 15 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago is when I first heard about it. And in fact, I know Karen Bracken. She's the one that introduced me to the stuff that was going on. There's another lady in Knoxville who's involved with your organization. I think she's your vice chair, which is Kathleen Marquardt. Very, knows this stuff inside and out. And so between the articles that she writes and the things that me and others learned from Karen, and there was a guy she brought out of Alabama the first time, and I cannot remember, I want to say Casey may have been his last name, came and talked to us and some legislators as well in Tennessee. And that was years ago. A lot more people are aware now than they were then of these things that are going on.
Oh, absolutely. And Kathleen and I have been working together for well over 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And she's very, very knowledgeable with all this stuff. We started out with what was called the Wise Use Movement. And that was kind of the beginning of a lot of groups coming together. And she had an organization called Putting People First, one of the very first people to really stand up to the tyranny of the animal rights movement. And Kathleen went through an incredible amount of pressure. I mean, she had to be armed all the time. She had to look under her car to see if there were bombs underneath it. These kind of threats she lived with for quite a while. And so, yeah, she's been through an incredible amount, but she knows this stuff. And this is what's so key to what people need to understand. There is an agenda here. It is not just a bunch of mediocre issues that kind of crazy that come together. This is an absolute agenda, and they leave no stone unturned. Every single thing is designed to destroy our culture, our system of government, our economic system. And they know how to do it. A little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. And they put it together. But then people begin to look at it and think, well, that's just crazy. I don't know why they're doing that particular thing right here. And, this is what we have to deal with, is get people to understand that there is an entire agenda that they have to, to focus on.
And if you read it, if you go to the UN Agenda 21 or 2030, if you go on their site and read it, just read it a little bit, it will stand out. You're like, wait a minute, this is pretty much just socialism / communism in green. That's pretty much what they're using the save the earth, save the world type, as cover for control. That's pretty much what they do.
Yeah. What it is always in the past, when you had tyrants that wanted to rule the world, what did they do? They put armies together and they invaded, they killed people, and they subjugated them. These guys are diabolical. What they've come up with is a way to get you to voluntarily surrender your liberties. Right. And what is that? Oh, it doesn't matter how many rights you think you have if you don't have a planet to stand on. That's the fear tactic that they use. Right. That's what the whole environmental movement is about. It is a fear tactic. We can go through all of their policies, the entire environmental movement, and prove that almost every single thing they say is an absolute lie. It is not based on fact. There is no evidence whatsoever of man-made warming of the earth, with one exception, and that is the massive acres buried under solar panels and wind towers that they are now finding. That when you've seen these photographs that go just as far as the eye can see, and they call this protecting the planet.
Yeah.
And they are finding that when you've got that many solar panels lined up and so forth, that it is changing the environment over that land. And guess what it does? It creates warming. And it also creates storms. And, one of the things that they have to keep you believing this stuff, they've told us that climate change is going to cause big changes in our climate every day. It's going to create storms. It's going to, you're going to see these kind of things happening. Well, actually, the things they are doing supposedly to get rid of all this, to protect us, are the things causing those very problems. So, that the greatest danger to the environment is wind and solar and some the other things that they're doing. And the greatest protectors of the land are farmers, the people who have to live off of it, the people in the timber industry and so forth, are the greatest protectors of the land, because if they don't, they'll be out of business.
Absolutely. Well, maybe we can get the animal rights people and these people fighting, because, with all those big wind turbines, all the birds that are killed every year by them. So somehow we could turn them against each other.
Well, this is the interesting thing about it. I mean, you're absolutely right. That should be what's happening if they were really, truly about that issue. But this begins to show their hypocrisy when their very policies, are being put in place that are damaging the things they say they're trying to protect. So that really is the greatest example of the hypocrisy of the entire movement, and proves it has nothing to do with protecting the environment. It has to do with control. And the one thing I don't understand about it is that if they achieved everything they're trying to, they have reduced the population by a massive amount. They have destroyed the economy. They are cutting back our food supply, our energy supply. They've got to live in this world too. What are they counting on? Now, and every time I say that, people say, well, they've got all this stuff in the background that, they still are going to have a world of misery. Who wants to be in that world? But, that's the puzzle of it all.
Right. Now, it was encouraging to hear Trump call out, basically, this is not the exact term he used, but he pretty much identified the Green New Deal as garbage, he identified that. And I think, that's good to hear that he is aware that's what it is. And I know, Trump is doing some great things. I think way too many people, though, think that he's going to fix absolutely everything. That's not feasible. He's only going to be there for 4 years. And he doesn't even necessarily thoroughly understand all of these threats. But the WEF, in fear that he was going to win back in October, they met in San Francisco to discuss how to continue to push their agenda. Now, their agenda, the WEF and the UN Agenda 21, 2030, they're all in sync. And so, but they had a meeting. What can you tell us about that meeting, and what do you know about what came out of it?
Well, it's coming out pretty clearly that the other side already knew that Trump was going to win this thing. And so they were, very concerned about what are we going to do, because everything is about the agenda. How are we going to keep our agenda moving forward with him at the federal level, doing all the things he's promised he's going to do? He's going to mess us up big time. And the point of this summit in San Francisco back in October was to prepare for his administration, and the focus was creating new tactics to work at the local level, local, county, and state levels, to keep moving this agenda forward. And so they came up with tactics to do that, and that's what we're seeing evidence of that happening. One of the things that everyone needs to understand is that there is, they don't need UN troops to push all this stuff in place. Their shock troops are non-governmental organizations, NGOs, private organizations. I mentioned the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy. There's a World Wildlife Federation, which is the biggest one of the bunch, and but they've also got lots and lots of little ones. Here in my county in Virginia, we have the Piedmont Environmental Council. They literally control the county commission and probably the city council as well. And they are right there. They've got some of their own people elected on there. They've also, what they do is they surround your elected officials. You'll find there are 25 or 30, maybe 40 different organizations operating in your community. They have grant money coming from HUD or the Department of Transportation or the EPA. And each of these things, they help write those grants. So they know the small print in there. You may think that they have convinced your city council to get a grant to help pave Main Street, for example. And you think, oh, okay, we got the grant to do that. I know in my hometown in Ohio, they needed infrastructure fixed underneath the town square. There was 100-year-old wires and pipelines and things like that. Yeah, it's legitimate. You got to fix those things. Got a grant to do that. And it also ended up saying in the grant, they didn't know this at the time, that they had to put a roundabout on each corner of the square so that they could eliminate the traffic lights. You know, there you go with, you know, the whole problem with emissions from your car sitting at a traffic light. Right. That was one of the things they ended up having to do. This is what they do. You get a grant and they're pressuring you to get those grants. They're pressuring you to put these policies into place. And if you wonder why you go to city council or your county commission to try to talk to them about something you know is that's really not a good idea, and they're not even listening to you. It's because they are surrounded by these NGOs, right, and they're whispering in your ear, don't pay attention to that guy, he's crazy. Yeah. And they ignore you. And the line you're going to get from your county commissioner is going to be, well, that's just the way it's done now. Right. You know, everybody's doing it this way, and the federal government tells us we have to do that. The good news, what's happened with Trump, is that he is now looking at these things. They're looking at these NGOs, the money they're getting, all of that stuff that Elon Musk put out, Doge put out just a few weeks ago on the USAID and the billions and billions of dollars. It was very clearly right in there, these NGOs getting that kind of money. They're using it. They're coming in on the attack. Well, that's working hand in hand with what the World Economic Forum is working with. A lot of people don't understand that the World Economic Forum, when they have these international meetings and so forth, lots of times they bring in local elected representatives for training on how to put this stuff in place. And so step by step, that's what they're doing. And they are prepared to come now into your city council to push these policies in place in your state legislature. And, you know, the way our government is set up, the federal government has only, I think, 19 enumerated policies, 17 or 19. And that is it. They're not really supposed to do anything else.
Yeah. Of course, they ignore that.
Yeah, they just put these in. The state government can now, is what can have the power to begin to put these things in place. And we're seeing them begin to take these actions that are affecting our energy policies, our food policies, our all the things that are the pieces and parts of putting this thing in place.
Right. And the Trump administration, even though I guess you could say they've been alerted to it, these people are so embedded in the system. And of course, you mentioned the NGOs, but we also have these regional planning commissions. Yes. So for instance, in this area, you fall under like the Greater Nashville Regional Planning Commission, and all that stuff is incorporated in there. Your planning associations, your American planners, they're in on it. The realtors are in on it. I mean, there's so many different levels that have bought into this. And unless you know what to look for, you're probably thinking, hey, well, Trump's in, I'm sure anything bad has been taken care of, but I guarantee you it hasn't. There's no way they can weed all this stuff out overnight.
No, absolutely not. And you mentioned the regional councils. I mean, they may represent, these regional councils are overseeing 10, 15 different counties.
Yep.
And nobody's elected to these regional councils. They'll always say, well, we got a city councilman, we got a county commissioner on our regional council, but they weren't elected to that. That means that they can do things that they don't have a responsibility to any of their constituents. And they are the ones that now will apply for those grants, and it's not just for one county, it'll go to all 15 counties. And as you look across the country, you look at New England versus, say, for Arizona, for example, or the southern states versus the northern states. There's a different culture there. There's a different attitude, a different way of things being done. And all of a sudden people are mentioning how everything's starting to look alike. Every town you go to, all the buildings look alike. Everything is run. It's because of these regional policies being put in place step by step by step that are all the same thing. And then they'll tell you, oh, no, this is all just local. Really?
Right.
How's come almost every program in the entire country, every one of these comprehensive plans, talk about international building codes, international plumbing codes? Right. And where's the local in that? I can take you to Jamaica and Dubai and show you the exact same plan with the exact same language. This is how the UN and the World Economic Forum are working to put this agenda in place worldwide.
And the term sustainable development, when you hear sustainable development, in my opinion, you should think socialist doctrine, because that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, that is exactly the tool that, to put Agenda 21 in place, Agenda 2030, the Green New Deal, and the Great Reset from the World Economic Forum. Sustainable development is the word. Every time, if you look into your local comprehensive plan and you see the word sustainable anywhere in there, that is what that's from. And we have international documents to prove that that is true. And so that is what needs to be done to go after. And what I have found after 35 years more, for almost 40 years working on this issue, I have found that if you can protect property rights, sustainable development cannot be imposed. Sustainable development is a destruction of private property rights. So this is why, after all these years, even though we worked on lots of other issues, my main focus today is protecting property rights. First of all, if you don't have property rights, then you don't have the ability to stand up and defend the First Amendment, because you can't. If you don't have your own property to stand on, you can't have freedom of speech. You can't have the Second Amendment. You can't have any of the other freedoms if you don't have the right to stand on your own property. And I have seen it done where you have a big demonstration somewhere and people come in and they'll say, well, right over here is the free speech zone. This is where you can say what you need to say, but not over here. I had a good friend, Michael Badnarik, who ran for president on the Libertarian Party as a candidate for them, and ran for president. And he told me that he went to a college one day, and he was going to speak to the students there, and they had him in this huge auditorium, and there weren't, more than 30 people in there. And he just felt weird with this great thing. And he said, can't we go into a smaller room and have more of a conversation? And they said, no, this is a free speech zone. And he said, I have news for you. Anywhere I go is a free speech zone. Yeah. But this is what they do. This take away your right to free speech. So private property ownership is the key to protecting our liberties at every level.
Absolutely. And any other, I know we're going to spend some time on conservation easements here in a second, but any other things that states need to look out for, states and counties as far as that goes, kind of what to know and what to look out for? Keywords or phrases maybe?
Yeah, it's vital to understand these NGOs. And I have been working very hard to try to help train people how to do research. Every community now has a comprehensive plan. And that plan is a tool. We didn't used to have comprehensive plans. It is a tool now to put this agenda in place. It is a global agenda. And as I said, the language is all the same everywhere. And the first thing you need to do to look into what's going on in your community is get a copy of that comprehensive plan. Lots of times it's right available on the website for your community. Other times you may have to go down to City Hall to get it or something. And do one thing. Look for one word in there that says anything about protection of property rights. Doesn't exist. There's a reason for that. And if you see sustainable in there, all those kind of words, then you know what this is. Now you begin to dig down deeper. You can look to see what kind of grants the community's taken. Begin to look to see what kind of NGOs you have operating at City Hall. Even if you're a small town, you're going to have 15 organizations working in there. They call them stakeholders. Yeah. You are the stakeholder. These people are not stakeholders. They even live there.
Well, no, they are stakeholders. They are holding that stake over all your rights, true. And they're driving it right through all your rights. That's what they mean by stakeholders.
You're correct. Yeah. So
conservation easements. Now, we have a bill, and this is the second year at least in Tennessee that this bill has come up. And the Senate version's already passed. It was Senate Bill 207, and House Bill 1325 will be voted on the 19th in the Ag and Natural Resources Committee in the House. And of course, the sponsor of that bill is Lamberth. If you see it in Tennessee, if you see a Johnson-Lamberth combination, it's a bad bill, okay? It's likely the governor's bill. And any of the governor's bills pretty much should be voted against. I'll just tell you that straight up. But anyway, so now I don't know. I think you've actually looked at this bill some. I think you're fairly familiar with it.
I've got a report on it. The report that I got on it, as the bill states, a grant application must prove satisfactory to the Department of Agriculture that the farmland or forest land will be used for farm and forestry purposes. But it goes on to put in there, qualified easement holders shall not sell, transfer, release, or otherwise divest a conservation easement acquired by for the past 10 years. But it says the purpose determines the conservation purpose determines how many cattle can be grazed, what crops can be planted, how many acres can be farmed, how many trees can be harvested. These kinds of things are in the bill. Now, what that means is you sign that easement, you have no control over your private property at all. And this is what we need to understand about conservation easements. You have these land trusts, which are these NGOs I've been talking about. And what they're going to be telling the farmer is that we can help protect your land. It will always be a farm. All you got to do is sign this easement. And now, if you do that, then the local government or the state government, whatever, won't be allowed to use eminent domain to take your land. And this is the threat that our farmers have all over the country, is government trying to take their land by eminent domain. You've got it right now. We're fighting in South Dakota and Iowa, North Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota. We're fighting there to stop the most idiotic plan I've ever seen in all these years of working against the environmental movement, which is the carbon capture pipelines that we're taking carbon out of the air and putting it in the ground. And I mean, first of all, every single living thing on Earth needs carbon dioxide. And so they're taking that out. And this is really just an excuse for a land grab. And you have these corporations, private companies that are building a private company for the pipeline. And they are going to farmers and they're saying, if you sign an easement to allow us to put the pipeline across your land, hey, we'll give you some money there for it, and we'll put it right across there. But I've got a copy of the letter. It says in there, if you don't sign this, then we are going to use eminent domain to take it away from you. They're playing games. The state government is allowing them to have this kind of power. And so there is the threat. You're a farmer, and all you want to do is farm your land, and now you're being threatened, and nobody's standing up for you. So, and plus the fact, if they're putting these policies in place, when you sign a conservation easement and you've got to use sustainable policies, and I just read what kind of things that means: the control of your cattle, the control of your how much land you can use. You have to use this much land for wildlife. You can't use it for your farming. Then you begin to go out of business because you can't make a profit on your land because of these policies. But they're using these conservation easements as the answer to all this. And what you're supposed to do is you sign the easement with this land trust in perpetuity forever.
And I don't think the Tennessee one is the Tennessee one. I thought it had a
this one doesn't. It's saying 10 years.
Right.
That is one of the things that I've been advocating that they do. First of all, let me just explain. They put it in perpetuity, but the land trust is not tied to that. The land trust,
just the person who sold it.
Just the person who, the land is always in it, but not. I actually saw a document from Ohio on these that said this is in perpetuity to the United States or its successors. The United States collapses and goes away, but that conservation easement's going to be there.
You still don't own your land. You still can't use your land, even if the United States collapses. You still can't use your land. Good Lord.
Yeah. Now, I saw that document.
That is wild. So, here's one of the things in Tennessee. The way this has been, that I have heard this sales pitch. We're losing all this farmland. We want to preserve the farmland. And you may have a farmer who maybe, for whatever reason, his kids are not going to take it over, but we want to keep that land around. And, they, of course, mentioned saving it from development. So the first thing that pops in my mind is, well, wait a minute. If the state and or county wanted to save something from development, can't we already do that with zoning? Don't we already have what's that thing they give a tax break for? What's that term? Good Lord, is it? It's not Greenland. It's Greenbelt. Greenbelt. You already have Greenbelt.
Yeah,
so I don't understand why they have to bring a third party in, but that's how they're selling it as far as what the state is supposedly trying to do.
Yeah. Because the thing is, again, these land trusts are not interested in preserving farmland. They are interested in getting control of land. This is part of that agenda. You have the 30 by 30 issue, which talks about locking away 30% of all the land in the nation. Actually they mean 50% by 2030. That's what that means. And you have massive amounts of land not being allowed to use. Human beings can't even walk on it. We're even talking about some national parks that end up in this situation. And what you see is them moving people off the rural land and into the cities where you've got smart growth, sustainable development. And to make this very clear as to the danger of this, what this means, because they understand that people who live in the rural areas are much more self-sufficient than people in the cities. I mean, there are people in the cities who think their food actually comes from Safeway. And, take a look at the map of the United States when we talk about red versus blue. Right. And you've seen this map where the only blue are the cities, the big cities in the country. And all the rest of it is people who want to live their lives as they choose and, what we call conservative. And so that tells you what you really need to know about it. Where every single thing we're talking about here, the environmental movement is not fighting for the environment. The land trusts are not fighting to save farmland. They are fighting to get control of the land. And so they use these tactics to get it, and they're getting the farmers to voluntarily surrender their liberties to do this, and they're signing these easements because they're losing money because of the other policies being put on them, and so they're offering me thousands of dollars here. I had a lady in Montana tell me that they had offered her $1 million to put a wind farm on her property. And, I'd have a hard time turning that down, when you need it. But this is how they operate. And then they, one of the questions here that we have, I have an activist handbook that we've created for local activists to fight back. And I have, one of the things I have in there are 10 questions to ask before you sign a conservation easement. And the first one that needs to be answered is that if I own the land, it's mine. Why do I have to worry about a developer coming in? Where does that come from? Oh, that's the city government or the county government using their power to come in and using eminent domain and take your land. If it's your land, if you own it, no one should be able to take it away from you if you're not willing to sell it. Right. And the use of eminent domain and what the founders originally did, there were like 3 different issues to use eminent domain. One was building roads, one was building forts and government buildings. And so, that has nothing to do with building a huge new development in town. Right. Whatever else they're doing. So, this is a misnomer. It should not be a threat to farmers. If property rights are protected and they don't want to sell it, that should be the end of the story.
Absolutely. Well, let me ask you this. So, and I don't have a very high opinion of our state legislature, our current governor, or the last one for that matter, but why do you think the states are pushing this? I mean, what does it benefit the state of Tennessee to push this issue? How is the WEF crowd or the Sustainable Development crowd or whoever, how are they making it worth the state's while to push this garbage? I mean, because they're obviously pushing it, and although they have been somewhat responsive, at least last year, to some of the concerns, there's still a lot of concerns, and I don't understand why the state would push this.
Yeah. It's not a matter of the state benefiting from it. It is a matter of certain members of those legislatures or the governor's office or what have you that are benefiting from it. Take a look at the list that DOGE put out of the USAID and the billions and billions of dollars going into the pockets. I mean, they're actually buying the news media. This is how they get control. They need that state legislature to pass these kind of regulations so that they have control of the land. That's what it's about, the global control. Now, my saying that, for the past 30 years, the Southern Poverty Law Center has deemed me a domestic terrorist, and they have done 4 separate reports on me that I spread these conspiracy theories and hate speech, saying that they really are just trying to protect the planet. I think the truth is starting to come out. I feel the tinfoil coming off my hat like confetti today because of what's happening. And I don't back off from anything that I've ever said because I've never been proven wrong.
Well, so, by now, most thinking people know what the Southern Poverty Law Center is. I mean, they have pretty much shot themselves in the foot. So I think most people, if they read a negative review of an organization written by the Southern Poverty Law Center, they're probably, at least willing to say, well, they're probably a fairly decent group that they're critiquing here because everybody knows what SPLC is anymore. And a lot of people have woken up to these other things, but I think there's still, my big concern is there's still a lot that don't know that are in government at all levels. And there's so many people who think Trump's won and he's going to fix everything. And it's just not feasible.
Yeah. Well, that, and what you said there is my greatest fear, is that our people who have fought hard over the years now see, oh, thank God, he is doing these things for us. I don't have to do this anymore. I've got a family to raise, and I can start to enjoy life. And that's the end of it. I'm not going to have to fight anymore. That is my greatest fear, because as we just mentioned a little earlier about what the World Economic Forum is doing and their agenda to go into the local communities, this is the moment when we have got to be more alert and more dedicated to the fight than ever before. Because the wonderful thing about this, and all these years that I have been ridiculed and attacked for saying these things, suddenly we've got an administration that is revealing the truth in stark ways that even shocks me. You know, the greatest shock that I got out of all of that was for years we've talked about George Soros using his billions to buy our attorney generals and our judicial system and all of that. And it comes out from the USAID reveal. He was getting money from. He is not buying with his money. He's buying it with our
with
money.
ours. That's even worse. But yeah, there's been a lot exposed, and I think there'll be more exposed.
Yeah, but that gives us opportunity that now we have the facts like we've never had them before, and so we can go after this. But we have got to. I just sent a batch of petitions to Donald Trump about these very issues happening in the grassroots, in the farmland and the smart growth in the cities and things like that. The petition was asking him to be sure to get these in focus to in his agenda. They were delivered today to him. And I said in the letter I sent with it, the cover letter, that we working in the grassroots and him working on the federal level is a 1-2 punch, that we can finally get rid of all these guys and these policies and do it right. And that's exactly what we have to do. If you leave it to just him trying at the federal level, their whole tactic right now is to discredit him. And you see little pieces and parts of that coming out. You get questions about things, and you begin to wonder, why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? And that is them punching and punching and punching. And if we just leave it to where he has to fight this battle by himself, we are going to lose. 4 years from now, they're going to put it all back in place. Or we establish a permanent infrastructure in your community. I call it building a freedom pod, working in your community with your city councilman, your state, your county commissioners, your state legislators, and make them feel pressure from you. This is what I tell people. If you do the fight properly and you have countered these NGOs, you've exposed them, you've gotten your city councilman to feel pressure from you, and I've got lots of ways that you can do that. But here's what victory looks like if you've achieved that. The next time the NGO comes on and says, hey, here's a new plan, we got it all right here in a box for you, got the money for you too. And your city councilman, your county commissioner looks at him and says, are you nuts? Do you know what my people will do to me if we try this? That's what victory looks like, and that's what we've got to accomplish. And as you were mentioning, in the state legislature, there's always one or two that are really pushing the bad stuff. They seem to have the upper hand on everything. Same thing is true at every level of government. If you can figure out which ones those are, and that's done by research, we've got it all outlined, and you can target one of those people and knock them out at the next election, the other ones are going to look around and go, uh-oh, we better pay attention to these people. There are all kinds of tactics that we can use to build that kind of pressure, but they've got to hear from you. The trouble is now we're not there. Dave, one of the big things I've discovered, why we a lot of good conservative people, they love getting involved in a presidential election, but try to get them to go to city council and say, hey, I've got a family to raise, I got a job to do, I ain't going to do that. The reason that we believe in limited government is because we don't like government. We don't want it telling us every single thing we have to do. We definitely need to have government at a certain level, but it's got to be controlled by the people. And so the fact that we don't like government, we don't want to go and be involved at that level, particularly at the local level. So this is one thing we need to understand. We've got to be there. We're not there now. And these NGO organizations are surrounding your elected officials, and they are dictating what takes place, and if you show up, you're just one nutcase, that they can dismiss, and
Yeah.
that's the whole key.
Yeah. And I've
Yeah.
seen that at the county level. And I'll tell you, at state level, I'm sure every other state's the same way. Anytime I go up there, I mean, the lobbyists are there every day. Okay.
Hmm?
The lobbyists, they're there every day. The legislators are there. The lobbyists are there. The left is there in force every day. I mean,
Yeah.
Tennessee's got a Republican super majority. So there's only a handful of Democrats in the House and Senate. They don't have any power. Yet you would think they were running the show in some ways, because trying to get something really conservative through on any topic, this or anything else, hey, it's an uphill battle. They'll throw you a bone every now and then, but it's almost as if the Democrats are still running it, and that may be because so many of our elected Republicans are Democrats at heart. But it is frustrating. Another thing too, you mentioned that they're going to work at the state and local level, and I know you know this. They have been entrenched for years already, so they already have the advantage on us. It's easy for them to say, okay, look, we're just going to work. We're going to work harder at the state and local level,
Yeah.
but we've never had enough people to counter them as it is on hardly any topic, this topic or anything else. So it's just, so having Trump is great. The downside is so many people, just like you said, they think, okay, I can back off now. They don't quit. The left never quits. The left never sleeps, I guess you could say. And they have infiltrated everything. They've done this over decades. So, they could easily wait out Trump, because unfortunately he's not going to be able to get rid of all of them. And
It's
like
huge.
you said, we'll be back at
Huge
square
job.
one.
Yeah, and they, they're laying there. They're there. There is nothing too small for them. There's no position too small. Even if it's just a little board appointment in the community, that has some influence. That's why it exists. They probably created it in the first place.
Yeah.
So they know exactly how to do all that. And we always want to look. And I have had people tell me that, well, we had this big issue come up, and we had 100 people show up at city council. And I said, what happened? Well, nothing. They didn't listen to us. And I say, what did you do the next day? Well, nothing. It didn't work. I said, they were looking at their watch. They knew that's exactly what you were going to do. And if you have 100 people show up, even if they don't pay attention to you, that is a victory. Get the contact information of all 100 people and get them back there again and again. I've got an organization that I've worked very closely with in Shreveport, Louisiana. They're called the Caddo Alliance for Freedom. And the gentleman who started it, I interviewed him one day, and he told me that what was happening was the Caddo Lake there, and they have their own township. And the city council of Shreveport was starting to extend its influence that was going to affect the people who live around this lake. And so he and 2 or 3 other guys went to Shreveport, and they met with the city councilman, and they asked him, or they wanted to talk to him about this. He listened to what they had to say, and he basically patted them on the head and said, you look like nice boys, but they're not going to have any input on this because that's just the way it's done now. And Chris, the gentleman who was in charge, they were non-political people to begin with. They weren't political activists. But he said something snapped in his mind right then and there, like, want to bet? And they went to work. And they started fighting. They started getting the message out and so forth. They got 100 people to show up at every single council meeting. They have 4,000 people on their Facebook page now.
Wow.
They pass out leaflets door to door to tell people what's going on. And they've even gotten some of their people now elected to the county, in the township and state legislature. And he told me that then after they accomplished a lot of this, that city councilman walked by and said, what can I do for you fellas?
Yeah, I bet he did. Hey,
Yeah.
Back to the easements for just a second. So, like I said, last year it was brought up about not making them permanent. And so I think, well, this year's bill has a 10-year. So
No.
if you're going to get an easement, what are some other things that I mean, I don't like the ideas at all because I don't trust the people behind it on either side. I don't trust the legislature on this, especially the two people that are pushing this bill right there. That's a red flag for me. And I assume the governor's probably all fine with the bill, which is another red flag for me. And then, of course, I know that somebody's going to come up and buy this, or, the people, the NGO involved is going to be an issue. So what are some of the things that, if you can't stop it, that you would want to, protections that you would want to have in it?
Yeah.
Or is there anything, is there a bill that you could do an easement that you could put enough protections in there to where you would be okay?
Number one on that would be that it isn't in perpetuity. I suggested like 5 years.
Right.
If you have an easement on your property and all this stuff is happening and it's not working for you, 5 years is enough time to figure that out. Now, some of them are proposing 10, 15, maybe even 40 years, but it has to have an ending to it. If it's not working for you, there has to be a way out of it. And I think if you've got a state legislature that wants to put some kind of bill through, and we've got to protect the property, we need to have these conservation easements, make sure at least that you start advocating that they have a time limit on it so that people can get out of it if it's not working for them. That is, I think that would strengthen it in a great way for the property owner, and not everything's in the hands of the land trust. And let me give you just a couple of examples of what we've run into with conservation easements. There was years ago, there was a gentleman in Pennsylvania, an older elderly gentleman, and he wanted to preserve his land and make sure it was always a farm, and so he signed a conservation easement. And they, of course, gave him some money for doing that. And he decided, I can finally build my dream house on my land. And he starts building it. The land trust comes along and says, you can't do that. That's not in your easement. You can't do that. He literally had to stand in his yard while they tore down the house he was building. That's the control that they had on it. Another one in which I was personally involved in here in Virginia, we had a lady who was buying a farm. She was buying it from the Piedmont Environmental Council, the land trust that controls the whole place. And they let the land go into great disrepair. The barn had a big tree crash down in the middle of it. They in the sale of the property, they slipped in a conservation easement. And she said, well, what is this? They said, oh, that makes sure it's always going to be a farmland. Oh, okay. And she signs it. Then she spent several $100,000 fixing things up. And they decided they wanted it back. And she put in the barn, she put a little store in there to sell the products that she grew on the farm. And one night, she had a friend who had a child who was going to have a birthday. He wanted to have a birthday party. She says, well, come on over to our store. We got room over there for it. They can have a party there. It wasn't anything she was selling. It wasn't anything she was making money from or anything. It was just like you saying, well, come over to my house. You can have the party in my living room. That was the same thing. They said, violation. You weren't allowed to do that sort of thing there. And they started a campaign where they were doing surprise searches. They would come onto the property. They would go into her home, look in her closets, do everything else, just kind of like the Secret Service did or the FBI did to Trump at the Mar-a-Lago. But they started doing stuff like that. And
I mean, how can they be? On what authority do they have to go into somebody's house and search for anything?
They were looking what you're allowed to do in the easement, and if you weren't allowed to do these kind of things, then it's a violation. And it was just these are a tool to control you, and they used it that way. Well, she went to war with them, and I and a whole bunch of other people in the county, several other groups and stuff, we joined her and joined her forces. We ended up getting 2 bills passed in the Virginia legislature under her name to protect her property. This became one of the other things they tried to do. They went to the bank that was her mortgage holder and tried to buy her mortgage. That was another thing that they tried to do. But we went there and testified before the legislature and got 2 bills passed to protect property owners from these things. It was, and it put a whole bunch of pressure on the Piedmont Environmental Council. It became the first time in my knowledge of it all that a land trust was fighting to get out of a conservation easement because she had come at him so strongly and fought back. And so, it can be done. That could be the thing. But those are the kind of things. Now you've got people, as I mentioned, the states with the carbon capture pipeline.
Yeah.
There's also the whole thing with the wind and solar farms, getting farmers to sign these easements and to use that property. Once again, they get money. They're offered money for it, but they lose the control of the land. We now have in Minnesota, they are working to put big towers on property to carry the electricity supposedly being created by the solar farms. And I've jokingly said, well, they don't need the towers because they're not creating any electricity anyway. But they are having public meetings, bringing people in to give them all kind of propaganda as to why this is a good thing. You will have 100 different people showing up there in protest at these meetings. And they pay no attention to them. These are farmers. These are property owners saying, we don't want this. They don't pay attention to them. I have a very, very good activist there that works with me very closely. And we talked about it. And he went in. He has a way of doing this. And he went into the meeting, and people listening to all this were sitting there, and nobody was able to say anything. And he started asking questions and really putting it to them. And the county commissioner who was there had no answer for any of these questions. And they just say, well, that's just the way it's done. There's nothing we can do. The appointed utilities board says we have to do it this way and so forth. And I had him ask this question. You've got 100 people here who are opposed to this. Who is elected to represent them? Because you're representing these appointed boards. And they look at him like he was crazy. But that was the question. Who represents the property owners? Who represents the people who don't want this? Is there anybody representing them? And then he started asking, got him on a radio a couple of times, started asking various questions of this guy. And the answer the county commissioner said to him in one of the questions was, that's above my pay grade. I can't answer that question. And I suggested to him that he now look into how much money does the county spend to pay for the county government? How much money is there? His pay grade, you understand. And what I suggested he say, because you're surrendering to the appointed boards, these regional councils, all of that. Well, we don't need you then. We don't need to spend money on elected officials there who aren't going to do anything but represent these things. So let's just eliminate your job. Yeah, and that's one of the ways it's kind of way we kind of stick it to them. That explain yourself here, defend yourself. Another thing that I tell people: if you find them, we have a case around the country where they are in communities are removing zoning protections for single family neighborhoods.
Yep.
They're saying that's racist and that's wrong. And you've got people living in these low income government housing. If we bring that low income government housing into your nice neighborhood where you chose your home and you are trying to earn your own personal fortune by what your investment in your home, and suddenly all that's destroyed, somehow these people living in this government housing is going to be better off. They literally say that. They're going to have better income and so forth. Well, one of the things I suggest to people is you get a city councilman proposing this. He'll take a picture of his house, the neighborhood he's in, and then bring it out and say, is this house going to be in one of those kind of neighborhoods? You've got to make these people personally responsible for what their actions are, and make them defend themselves. And one final thing you can do, I won't go into all the details, but one final thing I mentioned is look at the policies that are being put in place in your community and put a scorecard together for those policies, 1 to 10. 1 is total communism, 10 is freedom's heroes. Then you look at the votes that those councilmen made and judge them the same way. Put it on a flyer, pass it out all over town. They're going to do you a huge favor at that point. They're going to respond. And when they respond, now you've got a public debate. And so those are just some of the ideas that you can do to stand up to these people and begin to fight back. Make it personal and make them, make the issue personal to the people in town, how it's affecting them, and make them responsible for their own actions.
Well, absolutely. Any other recommendations? And you've written several books. Matter of fact, I have one of your activist books, and I gave a copy of it to my county mayor. Don't know if he's read it yet or not. But any recommendations?
Yeah. Well, yeah, at our website, AmericanPolicy.org, we've got lots of tools there. We've got a whole section called Freedom Pods, and we're putting in there. We're trying to upgrade it and update it now. Various ideas. I talk with people who have wonderful things that they've done to succeed. I've got other people who say, don't ever do this. I want to give people both so they know, what to do. But we have the activist handbook that we put together that goes into detail on how to organize, build these freedom pods, focus on your community. Don't worry about next door. If you are successful in what you're doing in your community, then the next community over will say, hey, how'd you do that? And want to do it. We've got lots of different ideas in there of how to organize, and you do the research, you know who your enemy is, who's involved, what the policies are. You want to get 3 or 4 people who volunteer to go to every single public meeting and just sit and listen and take notes. They don't have to do another thing. And you can use that information. You'll begin to figure out who the leaders are. And you see them sitting there in their seats, and they're looking over at this guy, this guy, this guy. Those are the NGOs they're looking at, and they're talking to. And you might hear of something. Hey, that policy that we talked about 6 months ago? We're ready to put that in place. Now you know it before it happens, so you can begin to organize against it, and you get the upper hand on it. And being personal. Getting one of the big things, the problem we have, and people tell me all the time, is the news media, local news media won't listen to them. They're all with the left and listen to all the liberal stuff. And I do think you need to talk to them, because if you never ever talk to them, then they're never going to hear what you got to say. But at the same time, you can put together, I mentioned putting things on a flyer, getting it into stores on counters, getting it, take it around door to door, have people hear about it. And we've actually now got people who are starting their own little monthly newspaper. And it's like a shopper size. And the front pages are about local events, what's taking place in the local council and stuff. You can fill it in with national writers like myself and other people that have basic background information. You can sell advertising. I have a gentleman in Virginia who started one of these newspapers, and he distributed it by taking it to a 7-Eleven or a filling station, places like that. And he started to notice as he started to deliver them, people were standing there waiting for them. He now has expanded to 3 counties, puts out 85,000 a month. Wow. Doing this. Wow. And other communities are starting to do these things. We're trying to show people how to get it started and stuff. So there's taking control and getting your message out. And you cannot do this alone. If you go in there by yourself and try to speak out, you're courageous, but you're not going to get anything done.
Yeah, you're not effective.
But you get a team together, And you don't need a huge team. You can have 10 or 15. It can be really effective, but you can make a big difference and get it done. We've got that on our website. You can get a copy of it. My book, Sustainable: The War on Free Enterprise, Private Property, and Individuals, it covers all these issues we're talking about. And I actually ended up writing a novel, much to my absolute shock. I never wrote fiction before in my life, and it's called Erase. And literally everything you're seeing now, the first reviews I got on it were, this is the most important political novel since 1984, Atlas Shrugged, and Michael Crichton's State of Fear.
Wow.
I was shocked when I got, and I've gotten several reviews comparing it to those. And what you're seeing today happening with Doge and all that kind of thing is like in the book that I wrote almost. I wrote it 9 years ago. And I just yesterday sent an email out to someone where there's been a lot of talk of trying to make it into a movie, and I'm trying. I'm trying to.
So you're going to play yourself?
No, I'm not in it. I killed myself in the opening chapter.
Oh, okay.
The murder mystery.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you for coming on and for all this great information and for all you do, and definitely want to have you back.
Absolutely, anytime. Happy to.
And I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch the program tonight. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, tninformer.com. Find and follow us on X as well as Facebook. I got a quick nullification bill update for those of you who haven't heard. The nullification bill in Tennessee, Senate Bill 479, it was put in general sub last week, so it's dead for the year. And, we'll see what happens with it next year, or a version of it. But we're not giving up on the nullification debate or the nullification fight, okay? It's too important. The only way you put this federal government in check long term is through the states. So we're not going to go away. There's a few things that you probably want to read in reference to this. In addition to the tncss.weebly.com site, that's Tennessee Citizens for State Sovereignty, which has a lot of great information. The 10th Amendment Center.com has great information. In a recent podcast they put out, The Supremacy Clause Hoax, How We Became What the Founders Fought. I definitely recommend you listen to that. That's an excellent podcast. There's a great article that you need to read. This is from federalistsociety.org, and it's the unbearable. The title of it is written by a federal judge, William Pryor. Now, I'm not saying I agree with all of his opinions by any means, but he wrote an excellent article about Marbury versus Madison, and he titled it The Unbearable Rightness of Marbury versus, it's real lessons and irrepressible myths. And it basically lays out the truth of Marbury versus Madison. And there were good, solid constitutional, there's some solid constitutional reasoning in Marbury versus Madison by the Chief Justice at the time, John Marshall. But there's been a lot of myths associated with it, and there's been a lot of distortions associated with it. And he lays them out. It's really worth reading. It's not the garbage that we're fed that John Marshall created judicial review, and that judicial review means judicial supremacy. So he really puts a knife through that myth. So I would really encourage you to read that. Tennessee Firearms Association, Day on the Hill, March 26th. Go to TennesseeFirearmsAssociation.com for more info on this event. Need to get up there. That also is the last day that they're going to run any of the gun bills to the House Civil Justice Sub. So that'd be a good day to be up there if you can. You'll get more information on that. And HJR 53, which that's the constitutional amendment to basically return our Constitution in the state of Tennessee to just say that you have the right to keep and bear arms, not that the legislature can regulate the wearing of arms. We're going to do away with that last little portion. So that's good information on the site for that. We do, yeah, right. And one other event here we have, and I'm going to have to read some of this off of my phone. So Live Not by Lies, This is going to be presented to you by the Maury County GOP. Tuesday, March 20th, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Well Church. That's at 1412 Trotwood Avenue, Columbia, Tennessee. Tickets are $10 online. And an evening with Rod Dreyer, best-selling author of Live Not by Lies. And these tickets are $20, and that's 27th March, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Maury County Memorial Building, 308 West 7th Street, Columbia, Tennessee. Give you a little bit on this. Live Not by Lies. It's a manual for Christian dissidents. It's a 2020 book by the American author Rod Dreyer. He examines the nature of contemporary soft totalitarianism. You remember we talked earlier, in the old days, somebody wanted to take over, they just got up a big army. But now the communists are working different in our government. And he draws parallels between current social trends and the oppressive regimes of 20th century Eastern Europe. He emphasizes the modern forms of control are less about violence and more about psychological manipulation and the enforcement of ideological conformity. Boy, does that sound familiar. And he shares his experience of Eastern Europe dissidents, the clergy, the laity, martyrs, and confessors who resisted communist regimes. These narratives serve as a cautionary tale and provide practical advice for recognizing and opposing similar patterns in our society today. So that's definitely worth checking out, and you can get the tickets online. The information is also on our website, so we appreciate you tuning in for that. Join us later tonight at 8:30 for our second show. We'll be joined by Andrea Gomez with Tennessee Fair Elections to get an update on election integrity legislation, and we're going to talk a little bit about some school legislation. Our guest next week will be John Harris with the Tennessee Firearms Association, here to detail how our state's opposition to the Second Amendment, how to detail our state's opposition to the Second Amendment and what legislation still has a chance to pass. Hope you'll join us next week. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.